I actually have my eye on a squirrel home up there, and I saw him run in. And he's been in there now about 20 minutes, and he probably thinks that I have nothing better to do. He would be mistaken. So this is one of my favorite hardwood forests. A lot of squirrels in the area. There's a lot of nests. So a lake right behind me kind of opens up there. Well, let's talk about this then. At the range about a month ago, it did what I expected it to do. The gun was capable of 1-inch groups at 100 yards, half-inch, 3/8 inch groups at 50 yards, as they say, if I did my part. So while we're taking a look at the shots at the range, let's talk about the differences between the R3 and the R2.5. That's my little gray one that I have, the 22 caliber. Edgun made a lot of significant changes to this model. First and foremost, even out in the woods, you can't escape the noise. It's a sad sounding train. Sounds like a crying dog. So first and foremost, one of the biggest changes is in the barrel and shroud mechanism. The barrel in this R3 gun is not held on by this clamp at all, like the old one was. So the old one was clamped in really hard. The barrel stopped right about here, as does this one. The shroud slipped over it and screwed on to a thread that was on the end of the barrel toward the middle of the shroud. So the shroud actually slipped over a good portion of the barrel and then had some out here as well. What was holding the barrel in place was just these clamps. And there wasn't even any screws back in the breech. It simply butted up against the breech and had an O-ring in there. Very different than this model, which has a barrel that screws into the breech, but the breech isn't what holds the barrel in place. It is the shroud that holds it in place. Now take a look at these pictures, because they're probably going to tell the story better than I can. But essentially what happens is, you got the barrel, when screwed into the back of here, it can float around, it can clank around here. The shroud on this end right here has a little circular piece of machined metal that butts into this clamp right here. It fits perfectly, it's machined perfectly to fit in there. What you have is the shroud with the help of a very special screw right here, pulling itself back toward the breech direction, which then essentially floats the entire thing. In theory, this mechanism should prove to have better accuracy because the barrel is even more independent of the air reservoir, but it comes at the price of not being as durable and not being quite as easy to work on as the 2.5. There's a lot of parts in here. There's a part here, there's a screw here that screws onto the barrel and screws into the shroud. And basically, it lacks the toughness that I still feel with the 2.5. I'm not saying the gun is delicate by any means. I just felt like I could use the 2.5 as a crowbar. And this one I'm a little more careful with because of this floated barrel system. Like I said, in theory, it should create better accuracy. And this 3.0 is a little more accurate than my 2.5. But I think that's mostly due to the fact that the manufacturer upgraded these barrels. Lothar Walther makes them for Edgun. And these R3 barrels are machined to the manufacturer's specifications. The other ones, the barrels from 2.5 and 2.0 Edguns were cut a little more rough. They chewed up the pellets a little more, and they required a little more cleaning. This one, I think I put about 2,000 to 3,000 pellets through it, and it hasn't shown me any loss of accuracy at all. So there's clearly many variables at play here as to what could create better accuracy out of the R3. And when I say better accuracy, we're talking about, this much better at 100 yards. It isn't that significant. You can only get so much out of these things because they're all contingent on the quality of the lead you're slinging through them. If I'm not mistaken too, Ed angled the rail here down. What that means is if the scope is flat, the barrel points up a teeny bit. So this is going to give you longer range potential. And it's a good idea, actually. And it's one that I think a lot of PCP manufacturers should take. Because a lot of these guys buy a scope and they run out of, mil dots. They run out of range at 100, 120 yards. And by angling that rail just a little bit, you can stretch things out to 150, maybe 200 with the same scope. Besides the barrel and shroud modifications, the trigger has been upgraded as well. The entire... Hang on. Oh, that predator hit him hard. The trigger, on the other hand, is the flip side of that. It's actually a more sturdier pack now than it was. The other one had its push rods exposed, and this one is all nice and into one nice package. Snaps right into place, and it does feel a little bit better than the other one. The trigger on these bullpups, I still haven't felt them to be anywhere remotely as good as a standard gun. But considering all the push rods and mechanisms that are in here, it's dang good. And the truth is that it's probably an ideal hunting trigger because it's about 1 to 2 pounds of pull. And you definitely know when your finger is on the trigger. There's no ambiguity to how it feels. And that's really nice, especially when you have gloves on. And it's nice to feel a little bit of resistance there so you know exactly when the trigger's moving. And of course, notably is the stock change. Edgun decided to go with this walnut, and it is kind of pretty. I gotta say though, I'm partial to the old gray. I like it better, and I'll tell you why. First off, this material is more slippery. It's got a really nice finish to it, and that's fantastic. It's really beautiful, but it doesn't let your hands tack to it as well as the old one did. The other thing is, because it doesn't have the paint spray on it, these edges right here are sharper than they were. That paint would spray over top of these sharp edges and kind of round everything off. So when I grab this one right here and I can pivot it around, it pushes, you know, those sharp angles to the wood push in my hand. Whereas the other one rounded off nicely and I didn't have any discomfort at all. That's just personal preference. Some would even say nitpicking. And the good news is that Edgun will be offering the old way, if they're not already, on these guns. So it was only the paint for a while, then it was only the walnut for a while. Now it's gonna be both. There'll be options. Of course, this is the long version of the Matador, and admittedly it's a little bigger than I would like. I've been out here for a couple hours now. It's not like I'm wearing out, but I do admit that the little guy just made for nicer navigation through sticks and brush. You know, I could grab that thing right here, let it fall to my side, tuck it really close, and go through wherever I wanted to. The extra, I don't know, 6 to 7 inches on the end of this one, it does make a difference. If this was my only gun, I'd get by just fine. But you know, when we're talking about guns as expensive as this, you want to have it perfect. So I'm 5'8", 150 pounds. That's like 70, 75 kilos, something like that. I don't know how many centimeters, and like 173. And I prefer the smaller one. You're a big boy, you know, you got big boy arms. Go ahead and grab the long. You're gonna get 20, 30 more shots out of it, so what the heck, you might as well take them. Smaller guys like me, I'd stick with the standard one. And now that Edgun's offering 25 cal in the standard size, yeah, there's a good chance that I'll probably let this one go and grab one of them instead. One change they've made that I don't care for is the butt plate. Let me see if I can focus that in. It looks real cool. And if all you do is shoot offhand, it won't make a difference. But there's one thing that I liked about the old one. That rubber butt pad. It wasn't as pretty as this one by any means, but when you were bench shooting, if you bipoded the front of this, then had this part on the bench, that gave just a little bit. You could play with it by pushing it down and letting it up. So that's one thing I like to see come back. So my final thoughts, I think the R3 has made a lot of improvements on the R2.5, and it's probably all in all a better gun. I'm just so used to my 2.5, you know, with tens of thousands of pellets through it, that of course that's still going to be my favorite. Old habits die hard, and I've created a lot of them shooting that gun. I will say though, this R3 worth hanging on to, if only because it shoots those Predator pellets so well. This thing is slinging Predators at 50 foot-pounds. It is tearing holes in varmints, and it's doing it with incredible accuracy. Accuracy on par with JSB 18's, its favorite pellet. I have not stretched those Predator pellets out to 100 yards yet, so I don't know if they can reach way out there, but from what I've seen at 50, there's no reason to expect that they won't, and I really look forward to testing that out next time I get my butt to the range. Alright guys, that's enough, don't you think? I'm gonna go pick up my squirrel, see if I can't get a couple more out of these woods before I call it a day. Hope you enjoyed my snowy review. That's hard to say, snowy review of the Edgun Matador R3. Take care guys.